Hi there, I'm Dave Dowling. I'm a bulk ColorLink sales rep specializing in cut flowers. And the talk you're about to see is all about increasing your production and in turn increasing your income from cut flowers. So what we're going to talk about in this presentation here is how to increase your production. And if you increase your production, you should be increasing your sales, which is the money in the bank. So we're going to talk about 5 ways that you increase production on your farm. Basically, extend your season, add new crops, plant more crops, which isn't the same as adding new crops, add new customers, and then adding new employees if you need help so you can expand your production. For extending the season, you can overgrow what are called cool flowers or hardy annuals, where you plant them in the fall, either direct sown in late September or into October, or start your own plugs or order in plugs. You start them in August so you can plant them out in mid-September to mid-October. Things that you would do plugs would be things like Rebecca, Sweet William, things that you need to put a plant in the garden. But the things that you can direct to sow seed, like bachelor buttons and larkspur, you just plant right in the field mid-September to mid-October. The most important thing for both of them is to keep them watered. Nothing's worse than putting the seeds out there, watering it once and come back in 3 weeks and wonder why they didn't grow. Well, you have to water every day when you have seeds planted in the field. And if you plant a transplant, it's probably every other day. But the cool season plants give you a whole bunch of flowers early in the season, usually up here probably in last week of May, first week of June, but at the same time as your peonies are blooming. So it'll be a good addition to your farm if you're growing peonies and you don't have much other stuff blooming. These cool season or cool flowers would overwinter and give you an early production. On the other thing is grow early blooming perennials, things like yarrow, baptisia, and then the peonies. Up in this part of the country, you're in like zone 5B or 6. Those are usually blooming the first week of June, which is way before you would have any new annuals that you could plant out in the field, like sunflowers, zinnias. They're never blooming in June. So if you plant more early blooming perennials, you can extend your season. Because I know some people that grow cut flowers and don't start selling until first week of July when they got the annuals growing and blooming. If you have these perennials or overwintered annuals that are growing late May and June, you just added another 4 or 5 weeks of income to your farm. The other way to extend the season is high tunnels or caterpillar tunnels, which is, high tunnel is just a greenhouse without heat. Use your roll-up side so you can ventilate it and keep it from getting too hot in the wintertime or during the spring and fall. But if you put a crop in the high tunnel versus in the field, talking like we're the overwintered annuals, the Sweet William in the field might bloom up here the first week of June. Put it in a high tunnel, it might bloom the second or third week of May, so a couple weeks earlier. So we recommend planting some in the field and in the tunnel. So now instead of having 4 weeks of Sweet William, you now have 6 or 7 weeks, and you've basically doubled your income from Sweet William. The early crops to put in the spring is tulips. If you're going to grow just tulips in the field, that's a really early crop. My only caution is make sure you have a place to sell them. If you're used to only having summer, warm season annuals in June, you can't all of a sudden have a bunch of tulips to sell in the middle of April if you don't know where your customers are. If you're normally selling at a farmer's market that doesn't open until Mother's Day weekend or the first week in June, where are you going to sell your tulips? You need to have a customer base before you start planting these things that bloom really early. But you have the tulips, overwintered snapdragons. You can plant snapdragons in the fall in a tunnel, and they'll bloom in the spring early. Anemone and ranunculus, zone 5 and warmer. You can plant them in the tunnel in the fall. We're in a tunnel on March 1st, and they'll be blooming in April and May. And then stock, and another good plant is bells of Ireland. You can get those growing in the tunnel in late winter, early spring to have flowers in May and early June. And the other thing you use the tunnels for is in the fall, extending the season, both by just having something in there that might have been growing all summer, such as dahlias. Don't usually recommend putting zinnias in there, but other crops that are in the tunnel are protected from those early frosts in the fall, so you can have dahlias for another 2 or 3 weeks. And I know some farmers who sell $1,000 or $2,000 worth of dahlias every week, so if you can get 1 or 2 more weeks in the fall, that really adds up. One crop also for the fall is cut flower mums. Ball started for this season, had a program of cut mums. The genetics are from Syngenta, but it was basically pot mums that we did a trial, made sure they work as cut flowers, and it did, so we marked them as a cut flower. You plant them in early June, and you've got plants that are 3 feet tall, beautiful flowers, and blooming mid-October to mid-November. So those definitely have to go into a tunnel. They can't be out in the field. And this year we had 30 varieties, but the farm that we had trial those 30 varieties last year, this year they're trialing 40 more varieties. So hopefully for next season, we'll have anywhere from 60 to 70 different varieties of mums to grow for cut flowers.
They have to be in a tunnel?
It'd have to be in a tunnel because you're going to, up here in zone 6, 5, and 6, it's going to freeze before then, and it'll ruin them. It's not like a mum out in the garden that can take frost and it still looks good when you look out the window at it. The cut flower mum has to look good on the table, so it has to be perfect. It can't take any frost. So they definitely need to go in a tunnel, or if even colder, like zone 4, maybe in 5A, you'd want to have a heat source just for backup in case you get a cold spell. But they're definitely is something very easy to sell at a farmer's market or mixed bouquets. Not always easy to sell to a traditional florist because they can get the really cheap mums from South America, but it's that mum from South America and your mum yourself growing, even if it's the same variety, yours is going to be better because it's not been in a box for sometimes 2 or 3 weeks. Flowering kale for the fall. If you plant it outdoors, it starts to get color in mid-September. You put it in the tunnel, it gets colored up a little bit later. But in the tunnel, it's going to keep it protected, and you still be picking those up until Thanksgiving, sometimes Christmas, because they can take a freeze, it doesn't hurt them, and the protection of the tunnel is going to keep from getting damaged when you get that 15 degrees outside. They'll still be good to grow and harvest. Snapdragons in stock, you would start those now, and then you have flowers starting in late September and into October in the tunnel. Snapdragons, you got to make sure you use the right group number. Everybody probably isn't familiar with that. There's group 1, 2, 3, and 4 for snapdragons. And the numbers relate to when they bloom. The number 1 blooms in the winter, short days, December and January. 2 and 3 are for spring and fall, when you kind of almost like 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of dark. And then the number 4 is for the long days of summer. You got 16, 17 hours of sun, and it's really hot. But if you try and grow a group 1 in the summer, it's going to struggle and won't be any good. And the other way around, try and grow a group 4 snapdragon for January blooms, it's going to be terrible. So you got to make sure you use the right group. If you're growing for the fall, you want snapdragons that have the group 2 or 3 in the description. Then the other thing is to extend the season and grow some woody shrubs that you can sell in the fall. There's pictures here of the ilex berries. The one on the top is the gold, and then the red one. You can sell the gold up until Thanksgiving. The day after Thanksgiving, nobody wants it because they've changed that. Overnight, gone from fall, Thanksgiving, now everything's red and white. So you grow the red for after Christmas or after Thanksgiving into Christmas, and the orange for selling in October or November. The berries aren't quite ready until early November. The only problem with the orange ones is the leaves usually haven't fallen off the plant yet, so you have to remove them by hand. The red ones, the leaves fall off by Thanksgiving, and you're picking a stem that you don't have to do anything but just sell it. When you get a good stem of this, you can sell it at a farmer's market for $5 a stem. The grower was here yesterday. He says he sells them for $5 a stem to the florist. So they'll get good money off of them. The one thing about the ilex is they don't make a berry on the wood every year. It's not like a limelight hydrangea that makes a flower on new wood. It actually grows a stem one year. Next year, that stem gets flowers and produces the berries. So it's a 2-year crop. Depending how you grow them, some people grow them where they have 2 fields. In one field, they cut the berries this year and prune them back. Then next year, this is berries, and then go back to this one's berries the following year. Or you can just select each plant, pick the buried stems, and the ones that grow will be berries for next year if you don't have as many plants. But one thing that's really important to know about the winterberry holly is there's male and female plants. The female had the berries, the male mix the berries, the other one's happy. But it only takes 1 male plant to 50 female plants. It's not like you have to have 1 of each. And then there's other woody stems like dogwood and curly willow and pussy willow that you can also sell in the wintertime into the fall. And the curly willow and pussy willow also sells really well in the spring. Another thing to sell if you're selling at a farmer's market, if you have a retail store, into the fall, starting usually late October through Christmas, or even after that if you're still open or the market is still open, is the potted amaryllis and paper whites. And both of those also work as a cut flower. Another thing a lot of people don't think about is if you're at a market or a place to sell from Thanksgiving till Christmas, to sell Christmas wreaths and Christmas greens, but to decorate them with dried flowers that you grew in the flowers all season. And a lot of people don't grow dried flowers on purpose, so to speak. They just grow flowers, and if they have leftover statice or straw flowers, they'll hang them up and dry them and then use them on the wreaths at Christmas time. And it's not always just think of little flowers, dried hydrangeas, the limelight hydrangeas. They're tan color, but you put those in a wreath, and a $30 wreath is now $50, and you only added 5 hydrangea flowers to it. So it's something easy to do. But again, you have to have a place to sell it. So I used to sell at a farmer's market that was year-round, so I had the customer base was always there. So those are the things to extend the season. Now we're going to talk about adding new crops. When I say new crops, I'm talking about something you guys just never grown before. It's like I have the greens and fillers. Most flower shops, about 30 to 40% of what they sell is not flowers. If you ever go in a flower shop, they've got those leatherleaf ferns that they get from Florida. They would much rather have something that you grow locally that isn't that typical ugly green fern that looks fake. So things like eucalyptus, and then foliage, like here on the right is 9-bark. The one on the top is a dark burgundy, and then the bottom is called coppertina. It's a copper color. Those are shrubs. They get a little white flower in May or June, but then you're picking the leaves, and from mid to late June until frost, the plants are ready to be picked, and they just sit there. And they're very insect resistant. It's not like a plant that's going to have a bunch of holes in the leaves. They're a really good plant to grow as a cut foliage. So just if you think about growing, there's different fillers and greens that you're not necessarily just growing cut flowers. And even if you're not selling to florists, if you just make mixed bouquets to sell to farmers market or just selling by the stem at a farmers market, customers will still pick out greens and fill it to go with their flowers. Think of some perennials that you might not be growing. Baptisia, it blooms about the same time as peonies. If you don't have peonies, you need to have peonies to talk this afternoon. I talked about peonies, but peonies, if that's the number one plant that should be in every cut flower farm. They produce for the rest of your life, and you invest in them once, and you make money off them forever. So it's a no-brainer. You need to have peonies. Aromaris, it's a really tall flower that doesn't ship well, so the florist can't get it from the wholesaler. But if you have it, they will buy it from you. It's the kind of flowers you see like in a hotel lobby or the big restaurant, big bouquet at the front counter. They can be 3 or 4 feet tall. And then things like phlox and sedum. Phlox, there's a bunch of it growing and blooming out in the field. The garden's out here now, and also some sedum. There's some sedum that's still green, and there's some sedum that's starting to flower. You can sell it on both stages. Like I mentioned earlier about the things to extend your season, if you're not growing woody crops like lilac, curly willow, pussy willow, hydrangeas, the physocarpus here, which is the 9-bark, viburnum, which is the snowball viburnum, blooms usually right after the peonies. Things like that to grow these woodies that you might not have any shrubs on your farm, but to add those, and again, they're there forever, for years and years, and keep making you money. And then bulb crops, things like lilies, callas, tulips, all of those are things that you can grow as cut flowers. And if you're not growing any kind of bulb crop yet, ones to recommend would be tulips if you have a place to sell them in the spring, and the hyacinths. But just like gladiolas, dahlias, a really big flower now for weddings. Every bride has dahlias in the wedding from August till frost. So if you sell them to florists, you want to make sure you grow the right colors for weddings, that the florists will want the blush, the pinks, and the whites. But if you're selling at farmers markets, then you want the reds, the yellows, and the orange, because it's 2 different customer bases. So depending where you're selling your flowers, you need to make sure you're growing the right flowers for that customer. It's to me, when I was growing flowers, to me, to dig up a tuber and do all that work to store it and hope it survived the storage, it wasn't worth it. Just buy new ones even if you were just buying new tubers that cost $2 each, it's cheaper to buy new ones than to dig up your old ones. But then there is also dahlias you can buy as liners, which are rooted cuttings, but only limited varieties, the Karma varieties and Cafe au lait, and I think one other one. Definitely cheaper to buy that new plant, than to dig them up and store them.
But as far as the size of
the size ends up growing the same. Whether you're growing from a liner or a plug, the plant ends up being the same.
Okay.
Yeah, the liner will catch up to it. And then the next one is about plant more and plant more often, and that's the other one side of the handout has a long list of, it's called succession planting. If you look at the picture of the lilies, you've got 3 different crates there. One is about 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and 8 weeks. So basically planting lilies every 2 weeks all season, not just one planting in the spring. You can then sell lilies literally every week of the year if you have a greenhouse to grow them year round. So instead of selling that crop for just 2 or 3 weeks when they're blooming naturally, you extend the season to a year's worth. And if you look at the handout, I have an example of the sunflowers. If you were to plant sunflowers just one time in May or early June, and that's all you're going to plant for sunflowers, and plant 500 plants, you might sell 400 stems, and $1.50 a stem, it comes out to about $600. But if you succession plant, which means you plant sunflowers every week of the season for about 20 weeks, instead of make $600 a year, you're going to make $12,000 off of just sunflowers. So you can make a lot of money off of sunflowers, where that's going to pay a big chunk of your mortgage, pay for vacation, or I know one farmer that actually paid for her tractor by planting thousands of sunflowers every week. But I like to say one thing is you don't make any money growing cut flowers, you make all the money selling them. So you got to know where you're selling them. You can grow 1 million sunflowers, but if they sit in the field and rot, it's cost you a lot of money, you lost money. So selling is just as important as growing. So succession planting is amazing what you can do, increase your income that way in your production. And I always like to say, always plant 25% more than you planted last year. So if last year you planted 500 sunflowers a week, this year plant 600. because your sales should increase every year about 20%. Just going back to the same farmer's market, selling to the same florist, your sales should go up about 20% a year. Then if you add a new farmer's market that's a great Saturday market, figure that market's going to maybe raise your sales another 10% or 20%. So always plan on way more than you did last year, plant more, and then just work harder to make sure you sell it. But always plan on growing more because you're going to need it just with the customer base that you had, but then also always try to increase your customer base. But then I say on the slide there's a succession plant. That's what lists on the bottom of the handout all the different varieties that you can succession plant. And just to do that, like I said, if you can, instead of selling it 1 crop's worth, you sell 10 crops. If you just multiplied your income on that variety of plant times 10, it's almost it's a no-brainer, compounded interest. It can make your business go from $20,000 a year in sales to 30 or 40 just by having more varieties available every week because your succession plant. And then the last one we talk about is one more thing is let's talk about adding new customers and the different places where you can sell your flowers. You might be selling now just to farmers markets or just to florists or just a stand at the end of your driveway. But as soon as you add another location to sell your crop, you've increased the number of people buying it. You can sell, if you have one really good market, now you have 2 good ones, you basically double your income or double your sales. So some of the places that you can sell your flowers are at farmers markets, which is usually a place a lot of people start out at because you don't have to have 100 of the same variety or the same color. You can, if only 3 sunflowers are blooming that week, you can sell those 3 sunflowers along with the other flowers. It's not like if you're selling to a florist, they need 100 pink dahlias and you've only got 20, what can you do? But if you have 20 pink dahlias, you can sell to a farmer's market without any problem. So you got a farmer's market, then you have a farm market. A farm market to me is where it's just one stand, usually run by a farm. You might be the veggie grower, he's got all his corn and tomatoes, but he doesn't have flowers there to sell. So you make an arrangement with him to sell your flowers through his stand. And you have to decide whether it's going to be a straight sale where he buys 20 bunches, pays you $10 each, and you're done. If they die, it's his problem. Or you're going to sell on a commission where you take him 20 bunches and he's going to pay you $12 a bunch and he keeps whatever the difference is. But if something dies, it's out of your pocket, not his. But you have to make that arrangement and decide what it is before you take him any flowers, so it's up front. Either he's taking care of them or you're taking care of them, and who's at risk if any that don't sell. A flower stand to me is when you have a stand at the end of your driveway. Basically, you put a wagon out there with a shade with an umbrella, or some people I know have actually built little, almost like one of the barns you buy at Home Depot, and it's a little business out there where you're just selling your flowers at the end of your driveway, basically in the front of your farm. I know farmers. There's one in Ontario. I know. I told her she needs to start selling more flowers so she could go to the conference and just keep that money for the conference. Well, she put a stand at the end of her driveway. Not only did she go to the conference in South Carolina, her husband and the 3 kids went, plus a trip to Disney World, all from just, instead of doing weddings and selling at the farmer's market, she put a stand at the end of their driveway, and it paid for that family of 5 to go to the conference and Disneyland. So it's amazing what you can sell at the end of your driveway. And now it's gotten to the point where the stand at the end of her driveway has a new building that's out there, and it's only open on Saturdays. One of her kids, it's not like 13 or 14, runs it. They'll sell $2,000 or $3,000 worth of flowers every Saturday morning out at the end of the driveway. And they're in the middle of nowhere, Ontario. I'm talking rural, you have to drive 10 miles to get to a store. And they sell that much stuff just at the end of the driveway. I know somebody out in Virginia that did the same thing, a little stand. She was put 3 or 4 bouquets out there every day, and $600 a week she was selling just out at the end of her driveway. So that's a flower stand, a way to just get a little bit more money that way. Then if you're selling direct to florists and designers or to a wholesaler is where you sell the flowers to a company who then gets flowers from all over the world and then sells them to the local florists and designers. They're going to pay you the least for something. So there was a guy here yesterday who was saying he gets like 65 or 70 cents per sunflower selling to the wholesaler, but he can take him 1,000 sunflowers in one day. You're not going to sell 1,000 sunflowers anywhere else, whether the farmer's market is making deliveries to florists, in one drop. So the trade-off is selling to a wholesaler. You get a lower price, but you can sell a truckload at once. But also with a wholesaler, you want to make arrangements beforehand that they know you're growing that sunflowers and you're going to bring them 1,000 every week, and he's going to buy them. Because you can't have that relationship where you're growing 1,000 sunflowers a week for the wholesaler, and he says, "Oh, I don't need them for the next 2 weeks. I found them cheaper somewhere else." And then what are you going to do with your 2,000 sunflowers? So you make sure you have an arrangement with your wholesaler that you're committed to them and they're committed to you. Selling direct to florists and designers that are, a florist that has a brick and mortar store, or a designer often working out of the basement or a garage or out of the kitchen table, sometimes doing weddings and events, is to sell to them. The thing with them, especially the event designers, they may have weddings for the next 3 weeks and then they skip for 3 weeks. So it's not always a consistent customer, but they can buy a lot of stuff. I know a florist that's got a brick and mortar kind of store now, although it doesn't have regular hours. That's actually her there, Allan. She only uses locally grown flowers. No imported flowers ever cross the threshold of her door. She buys everything within 100 miles in Baltimore, is open year round, buys from about 30 different farms within 100 miles of her. But she's busy all the time, and she'll spend $3,000 or $4,000 a week on flowers, if not more, buying from all these different farms. If you have a designer, they might need $2,000 worth of flowers this week for this big wedding. Next 3 weeks, they don't need anything. So you need to have more than one outlet to sell your flowers. The next one I put up there is weddings. That's if you're going to do the weddings yourself, you or someone in your farm, do the weddings, make the bouquets, deal with the mom, the bridezilla, and all that kind of stuff. It can be really good money because that $1.75 Lysianthus, you took 10 of those, that was $17.50 for a bunch. Now it's a $140 bouquet because you made it look perfect and added 3 little pieces of green and put a ribbon on it. So the price is really high, but the commitment and the stress is way up there also. So you just gotta, you can do weddings, but there's a certain level of service that you gotta be ready to provide. Pick your own is if you have pick your own on your farm, and that could be either where you're open every Saturday from 9 to 12, or it could be an occasional every once in a while. I have a customer that's in south of Boston. She has a 200-member CSA, which is a subscription bouquet, which we talked about that down farther. I thought we did. If not, I will talk about it. Oh yeah, right there, CSA subscription. But then she sometimes has too many flowers just ready at once. Just the weather was perfect and so forth. So she'll send an email or put it on social media that you can come pick your own flowers on Saturday from 9 to 12. Prepay $30 and you get 30 stems or whatever the price is. And she'll sell another $3,000 or $4,000 worth of flowers from people who already bought flowers, or their friends and stuff who come out just to the farm for that day to have the farm experience and pick flowers. So that's the idea, pick your own, either a set time or just the occasional random promote it, them having a pick your own next Saturday, come out and buy flowers. Going back up, one of the CSA, that's community supported agriculture, or the bouquet subscription, or some people call it a flower share, where basically you sell your flowers usually back in December, January, maybe February. People pay in advance. It might be $20 or $40 or $50 a week, and they buy 4 weeks. They pay you back then, and then when the flowers are blooming in those weeks that you say that share is for, they get their share of the flowers are blooming. It might be big one week, it might be a little smaller the next week. But again, that can really add up to a lot. And the nice thing about that is, the farmer is saying that has a 200 shares, and the people paying it's a couple $100 each. So she's getting $40,000 in her bank account in January and February of seed money, basically, to buy seeds and finance the farm for the year. And then she's still selling more flowers later, so she still has income in the summer, but she gets that big chunk of change early in the season. On-farm special events. That would be something like if you've got a huge peony field and you have a peony festival. Or I know quite a few farmers who have a dahlia festival, and it's like second or third week in September, and the dahlias are in full bloom. They're amazing. They look great, and they'll either charge $10 a car, plus then you come and buy flowers, or they sell, it's $40 and you get $40 worth of flowers. But you know that if you're pre-selling the tickets online, you've got 300 people already bought the $40 ticket. That's $12,000 coming in my pocket, and that's going to be a really busy day. But the on-farm events can be really good like that. There's a dahlia farm in Virginia that does a dahlia festival in the fall, and he also does another one who has music and food trucks. And again, people pay to come, and they pay more money to buy product. And then another option is grocery store bouquets, and it's like at Wegmans, Whole Foods, or even the local mom and pop shop. It doesn't even have to be a grocery store, but it could be the nail salon or the bakery or something like that. They will sell your flowers for you. Whole Foods and Wegmans, they buy it outright, it's theirs. If it doesn't sell, it's their problem. Getting into both of those can be a little tricky. There's lots of paperwork involved. When I first sold, I was selling to Whole Foods, and they actually came to me, and it was before they made it more difficult. It was really easy. They just said, we want your flowers. And I said, okay, and we delivered, and I got a check came in the mail a month later. And now it's where you have to go through this whole long process to get registered with them, but then you deliver, and it's direct deposit. Exactly 30 days later, you get the money in your bank account. They pay 30 days. Wegmans is something similar. A local store, it's no different. You walk in and talk to that person, whether it's a mom and pop grocery store or a convenience store. You decide whether you want to sell it to them, sell them commission, or however you want to work it. But I know Ellen Frost with Local Color Flowers, she actually buys the flowers from farmers. She has a bouquet subscription where the people then pay her $40 or $50 for her to take those different farmer flowers, put them together. She also sells mixed bouquets she makes up in several different places around Baltimore. One is a bakery, one's a hair salon, where she delivers flowers, and then people buy them there. So there's all these different ways that you can sell your flowers. You just got to be creative and find the ones that will work for you. But like I said before, make sure you have lots of different, don't put all your eggs in one basket, have lots of different venues to sell. Because looking back at COVID, the flower industry went crazy because all of a sudden no imports. Literally in Holland, they threw in millions and millions of dollars worth of flowers. South America, they stopped planting them, and then the whole supply chain was disrupted. And there were some farmers who always sold at farmers markets. Some farmers markets were closed for the whole year or for months. A lot of them switched to what they called porch buckets, where they literally put buckets of flowers on the porch, and you came and picked them up and slid money under the door. Several of them decided to start shipping flowers, and it went so well, they're still shipping flowers now that everything's back sort of to normal. So that's why you want to have your different venues to sell, and it's always going to change over the life of your business. You might be all farmers markets and florists now, and in 10 years it might be all wholesale. So your farm's going to evolve through the years depending on what works best for you. Then the last way to increase your production is to hire help. If anybody who's here is still a one-man or one-person show? Yeah. If the shirts match, it can't be one person.
One family.
One family, okay.
Well, this is it.
Okay, that's it, okay.
It's getting hard.
We
Yes.
have our own job.
You got other off-farm jobs, right? You get to the point where you can't do all the work yourself. I mean, it gets to that point for everybody, and the hardest thing is to delegate it to someone else to delegate to it, whether it's an employee, your kid, your spouse. It's hard to give up the control, but there comes a point where you just have to do it. You have to hire outside help. There's no more kids coming. You've lost all your friends because they don't want to work for you anymore. You need to hire help. I know a farmer in New York, and it's her grandfather plants her seeds, and her mother helps pack and pick flowers. But she just now hired her first help this year, and she's been doing it for like 5 years. So where do you find workers? You start with family and friends. I had my sister work for me for 10 or almost 15 years. All she did was the farmers markets on Saturday, but the customers knew that she was the face of the business and was great, and it worked fine to doing that. I had other family that, usually teenagers that weren't always that good, but they lived in the neighborhood that were good to be hired. So you start with your family and friends, but then post a notice in the community bulletin board, whether it's at the post office, the nearby sandwich shop or something. But be upfront with and what you want. Just say, it's not come work on a flower farm, because they're going to picture Martha Stewart with a little basket and the cup of lemonade, and we all know that's not what it really is. Be upfront and say it's hot, dirty, nasty. You work in the rain some days, but you get to take home some flowers on the weekend. Be upfront with it, so you don't get the people coming out thinking it's a walk in the park, and then after the first 2 hours out there and swatting mosquitoes, they're like, I can't do this work anymore. So be upfront about that. High school FFA, 4-H, that kind of stuff. I was just talking to there's a couple of teachers here from one of the local high schools, and they have a hort department, and those kids, they're interested in horticulture, and that's a great group of people that are potential employees. Even the college hort departments. I know somebody who was going to college, something in agriculture, I don't remember exactly what his degree was. He's down eastern Tennessee, and somebody came there to the hort department, to the professor, said, I'm looking for a landscaper, a groundskeeper for my property, for the estate. It's this huge piece of property. And so they asked around. This one guy said, well, I'll take the job. He was going to college looking for something to do, and it was a good job. And ended up the wife that lived at the house, that the family wanted to grow cut flowers, and now he and the wife run this cut flower business. They both put in a little bit of the money to start, but now he runs the whole thing, and he gets paid a salary, they split the sales. He's doing really well, but he was just in college, and somebody showed up, I'm looking for a groundskeeper for my property, and he ended up basically running a cut flower farm that's on his boss's property, but it's working great for him. Put help wanted signs around town. If that means putting it down in your mailbox, somewhere just saying you need help on the flower farm. Use online ads like Indeed, or I don't know if many people do Craigslist anymore, but there's other online job search engine places. And like I was saying before, be upfront about what the job entails. If you have a place where it's unlimited description, like Craigslist, you used to put a 1,000-word in an ad. Tell the truth. It's dirty. You're going to have to work every Saturday at a farmer's market. You have to be able to lift 60 pounds. Don't beat around the bush. But one thing I found worked really well to put in an ad to kind of weed out the people that just weren't going to be able to do it. I put it was a great summer job for student athletes looking to stay in shape or keep in shape. Because then you get the guy on the track team or girl that plays lacrosse who's physically fit. They're used to being out in the heat, and they were some of my best employees are ones that literally were high school athletes and came to work with me for the summer. Then there's H2A, which is temporary agriculture, which usually foreigners, usually here South American or Mexican. It is a government program. There's actually companies who do all the paperwork for you. And there's several farmers that do it. It works really well for them. One farm's in Ohio, one's in Texas. So it all depends on what you want to do. If you want to go that route, you just have to usually hire several, 3 or 4 at a time for the season. They're usually there from like April to October, but they're going to work and do work circles around everybody else on the farm. One thing, if you're going to hire employees, just follow the rules, taxes, workers' comp. You definitely want to have workers' comp insurance. On my farm, I had 2 different times when it came in really handy. One guy broke his foot, like the 3rd week he was working for me, he just tripped on the ground and broke his foot, and he was at work, so it was workers' comp. He didn't work again that summer. Workers' comp paid him all summer, paid for the hospital and everything. I didn't pay a penny. Another time when a guy got stung by a bee, picking sunflowers, grabbed the flower, the bee got him in the hand somewhere, and he literally swelled up within a minute, hives everywhere, rushed him to the hospital, and he was in the hospital for the day. And I never saw the bill, but I know it was thousands of dollars because you can't walk to the front door of a hospital for under $2,000 or $3,000. So the workers' comp, you definitely want to have it. It's relatively cheap when you look at what it covers. And also when I say the safety is just make your farm safe. You know where the weeds are, you know where the hole is, where the old septic tank, just make sure that the employees know where that is or get rid of that kind of hazard situations. And then also pesticide regulations. If you're doing your own farm, you might be out to spraying stuff that has labels that you don't pay attention to. It's got 24-hour re-entry or that kind of stuff. Make sure that you do post the signs and make sure your employees know you don't go in that field it was sprayed this morning, that kind of stuff. Follow the rules, and because the last thing you want to do is have somebody go out in the field, get a rash or reaction, and I forgot I sprayed that, and now it's sorry, that doesn't work, and that just raises red flags for you with the local government and stuff. So those are all the different ways to increase your production, increase your income. So any other questions? You can ask me anything.
Retail garden center with just your 9 to 5 kind of hours, but we're adding basically you pick cut flower on the back part of the property. So on the hot summer days, would you think it would be best to actually not allow people to cut during the hot part of the day, or?
You can still let them cut. I think the biggest thing is make sure that there's only good flowers for them to pick, because the customers go out there and pick the most wide open blown out sunflower when they should be picking the ones just opening. Right. So it's to educate them which ones to pick. But I know when I had my farm, we picked all day. I mean,
oh, really?
You don't have time to pick it all in the morning. You've got acres and acres of flowers. Okay. And I can guarantee you in California, they're picking all day. Okay. They don't just go out and pick till 9 in the morning. Okay. Biggest thing is give them a bucket to pick in water. Yeah. So they're doing it, yeah. But I would still pick all day. Okay. But you'll find people most likely would come in the morning and eat later because they don't want to be out in the heat.
Right.
Yes?
So I planted snapdragons in the fall, 2 falls ago, and the some varieties survived, but they did really poorly. They looked fantastic until spring when we lost all our snow cover, and then it was like 50, and then it went down to 15, and they all died.
Right. Sounds like they're out in the open field.
They were in the field.
And what zone are you?
5B.
Yeah, I wouldn't put snapdragons out in the open field in 5B. It's just the weather's too unpredictable over the winter, too hot, too cold. You're better off just planting fresh plants early spring around your frost date, your last frost date. Because let's just talk about it. You can overwinter snapdragons and then come back amazing the next year, but they have to be able to survive that winter and hot spring and then again cold. It doesn't always happen.
They did great covered in the snow down to 0 degrees.
Because they're insulated. Right. Right. The snow kept them at 32 degrees all winter. They were happy. And then the snow melted and it got down to 10 or whatever and it ruined them. The other thing is you got to make sure you're planting the right number, the right group. Okay. Well, because you can overwinter snaps, you usually want to do the groups 2, 3, and 4. I wouldn't recommend the ones because they're going to want to be blooming in January and February. It's awful. But yeah, you're always at the mercy of the weather. But that's one thing that the tunnels can really make a difference because you have control over the weather. You know what you can make it rain or not in there. So it's not going to get overwatered. It's not, you can protect it from the wind usually. So do y'all growing any tunnels now?
We have one.
Okay.
And what we had in there came out really nice.
Yeah, so more tunnels.
Yeah.
But the thing with tunnels, they're expensive real estate, so you always want to manage those so that it's not sitting empty for 3 or 4 months at a time. As soon as that one, your overwintered ranunculus is done, put those mums in there. They go in 2 weeks later, and the mums finish up in November, and they put the ranunculus or something right back in there. So you're rotating crops all the time. And then also weed management on your whole farm is really important, but especially in a tunnel, you don't want to start having weeds going to seed in a tunnel. Because weed prevention is 10 million times better than weed eradication, trying to get rid of them after there. So the biggest thing is weed prevention, whether it's mulch, plastic, landscape fabric. Just don't let them happen in the first place, and try your best to not let them go to seed if you do have weeds. Just mow them down. Because weeds cost you more than any employee you'll ever have. Either lost production because the weeds took over the flowers, or you're paying someone to pull them and clean them up. Because sometimes it gets to the point where, can I pay someone $100 to weed this bed that I'm only going to make $80 in flowers, so no, it's not worth it. Mow it down. Because sometimes you have to think in your field. It's like, okay, those bachelor buttons or that cosmos or those zinnias, it's not worth trying to find the good flowers. Just give up on them. Go somewhere else. Because you're spending $10 to find $5 worth of flowers, and it's not worth it. But do you have any tunnels yet?
No.
Put it on your Christmas list. You'd be surprised what I've heard that people put on their Christmas list, and they've gotten tunnels and coolers, all kinds of stuff from their spouses, their parents, and all kinds of stuff. So don't be afraid to ask for weird stuff for Christmas.
That's going to be a cool box.
Yeah. And also there on the table, there's some little cards I showed around here. Ball Seed now has a cut flower webpage. It's ballseed.com/cutflowers. So if you go there, there's all just cut flower stuff, no petunias or impatiens. It's cut flower catalogs, growing information, some videos, things like that.